Welcome, everyone. We're here today with Larry Nelson, whose piece Moonbow appears on one of Mélomanie's upcoming CDs. And welcome to you, Larry. Larry was a longtime faculty member at Westchester University teaching music theory and composition. And he's also had a long relationship with Mélomanie. And so today we'd just like to talk a little bit about this great work, Moonbow, which we've performed a number of times and recently recorded. So welcome, Larry, and thanks for writing this amazing piece for us. I wonder if you could tell us, first of all, what is a moonbow?
A moonbow. Well, a moonbow is sometimes referred to as a lunar rainbow or a moon rainbow, and it's the reflection of ice crystals off of the light of the moon, and it appears in the opposite side of the sky from the moon. So it is a rainbow of sorts, but the one that you see at the edge of day, either dawn or dusk, always reflected from the moon.
That's very interesting. As I was re-listening to our recording and studying this piece again, I learned this detail that I must have known the first time we played the piece, but I forgot it, which is that space between the moon and the opposite side of the sky having that relationship, and it makes me think a lot about that sense of space that we get in the piece. And I think part of that is because we have such a great there's a real transparency in the texture, and when we have the whole ensemble playing together, I think you come up with some pretty cool colors, actually, where you can still hear every voice individually, and there's so much counterpoint going on. I wonder if you would talk a little bit about maybe some of the influences, about the style of this piece. I know that there's a blues section. There's something about canswars. I don't know if you can explain what canswars are. And there's also a section that you write interwoven but not Bach. So obviously, even if you're not influenced, you're trying to really determine a real character sense for some of these different sections. Can you talk a little bit about that?
In composing this piece, I was working with small ideas, maybe a chord, maybe a couple of chords, maybe a melodic gesture or a rhythmic gesture, which then each of these might have been expanded into a slightly longer section, which was then expanded even more. And these became little tiny pieces. And now each of the pieces probably had some particular focus. I know that when I decided Moonbow was going to be the title, I was very conscious of timbre as a parameter in music. So I had done a fair amount of electronic music and computer music over time, and I'm always fascinated by the overtone structure of events. And I wanted to try to recreate some of that in writing for the ensemble. So oftentimes I will have some vertical sonority, but each of the instruments enters one after another to sort of make it seem like it's a filter opening up to give you these timbre qualities. Now, the interwoven but not Bach, that section I was conscious that, counterpoint was the idea of that. And I wanted to have something that was sort of fun and would throw these gestures back and forth between the players. And I just thought it was fun to do it. And in no way was I trying to imitate Bach. Bach did it too well. I mean, there's no reason to try to do it again. But I wanted to have fun with it. And in fact, having fun was a very important parameter in the entire piece. I wanted this to be a collection of these small events, these small little pieces. But I wanted the ensemble to have some fun with it. And I was really pleased to see how Mélomanie did that. It showed on stage, and I think it shows in the recording too. So I'm really pleased about that.
Well, thank you. We did work hard on it, but it's all in the music there, so it comes out for a reason. It's interesting what you say about overtones. I hadn't really considered that as much, but I tend to think of overtones as being rather celestial and sort of up in the heavens, which I suppose they are, and it gives you more of a sense of that distance thinking that way. It's a very interesting idea. Larry, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about when this commission was made. I wonder, probably either Tracy or Kim approached you. Did they come to you with any idea in particular, or did they just say, "Hey, Larry, here's a bunch of money. I want you to write whatever you want. Write your dream piece." What was it?
The two of them met me for lunch, I believe, in 2013 or thereabouts. And indeed, they said, "We're not going to ask you to try to follow any stylistic thing. We really do want you to write what you want." And I considered that as the ideal commission. And I appreciated it and I accepted. And then I started to research the instruments in the ensemble. And I found that viola da gamba is not an instrument I had ever composed for. I needed to learn something about that. I had written for harpsichord, but it was back as a graduate student, and I was trying to imitate some English pieces from the late Renaissance, early Baroque. So my harpsichord background was not much better. So I had to research both of these. I had written for flute and for violin and for cello. I felt the challenge of, but the enjoyment of trying to put all of these pieces together. So I spoke to Tracy at some length about harpsichord. I spoke to Donna at some length about what a viola da gamba can do, and it was fun putting it all together.
I'm sure it was. That sounds like quite an experience. We of course have had many composers write works with Mélomanie, and the story is always the same. Well, I had to learn how to write for harpsichord. I had to had to learn how to write for gamba. Everyone knows how to write for flute and violin and cello, but so that's a real challenge. So, Larry, I know you've recently retired from Westchester University. So you're
Ismar, you're too kind. I retired in 2012, so that's 8 years ago plus.
That's recently enough,
Well, yes, it is. The one thing that changed there was that as much as I missed working with my students and in my classes, I did not miss the meetings and the forms to fill out and all that. But I had time to compose. So I went from the academic schedule, which is wonderful and challenging and exhausting, to a schedule where I could, when I wanted, I could compose. And so I really did replace a lot of that with composing, and it's been a really, I think, a productive time since my retirement, writing new pieces. So it's been good.
Well, certainly so. Of course, Moonbow came out of this period, and that's been fun for us to work on. You and I also collaborated on your Rhapsody, but you actually wrote that quite a long time ago, and we have a little YouTube recording that's going to come out pretty soon. And you've also written a duo piece for me and my duo partner, Wanshi Su. We play in duo Soria. I recently got to watch your premiere of 6 songs the other day. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of your recent projects? Maybe something that's upcoming?
Thank you for mentioning those pieces. The 6 songs were, as is necessary in this time, they were premiered online, live streamed, and I think the performers, the Bowers Fader duo, mezzo and guitar, they did a fantastic job, and I really enjoyed it, appreciated it, and certainly I've gotten a lot of very positive feedback. The cello and piano piece, Clouds Come Floating, is a piece that I'm looking forward to very much. It's a kind of a companion piece with another duo for flute and piano, and Kim is the flutist on that. So both Clouds Come Floating and the flute piano piece called Seeking Terpsichore, they share a lot of ideas. In fact, if you try to put them both on the desk at the same time, you can say, oh, look at this gesture. It appears in this other piece too. And I'm not apologizing for that. The gestures happen in creating the piece quite naturally. So I'm really quite comfortable with it. They're both fairly large pieces. I think Clouds Come Floating is about maybe 15 or 16 minutes. And Seeking Terpsichore is running on 22 now. So that's a big piece for any kind of concert. There was a call for scores called The Art of Virus. And this is an international kind of thing. And they were looking for pieces about 2 minutes in length. And they gave you materials, a pitch glass set, and said, do what you want with them. And then each time someone wrote a piece, then they sent this set of pitches, this pitch glass set, to 2 other people with one small change. The way a virus expands. So I did a purely electronic piece for that, had a good time. I actually orchestrated a kind of a 12 instrument piece, and then I transferred it all to a computer, and that's how I got that piece. So that was kind of fun. And I have recently gotten well into a piece called Passages for flute, double bass, and piano for my good friend Peter Paulson at Westchester. So that's been kind of fun too, and it's another one of my pieces in which I want to allow extraordinary performers to show extraordinary facility on their instrument, and it's fun. You almost surely can appreciate that from Clouds Come Floating. I ask a lot of both of you, and again, I'm not apologizing for it because you guys make beautiful music, and I'm looking forward to that.
Well, thanks. We're looking forward to that premiere as well. I also wanted to ask, it's interesting you mentioned that that these 2 pieces are related. I noticed that in the performance notes to Moonbow, there's something written there that I didn't know at the time that we first performed it, which is that you had little bits from 2 other previous works of yours.
I compose a lot of music, and sometimes it gets to performers who want to do it and do it well. And there have been other pieces that get thrown back on the shelf because they're not going to be done. That I still have those pieces, and some of them get used in new pieces. And I'm not going to go into any real detail about it, but I wrote a piece for a very, very awkward trio. I thought there's some very interesting things in it. And some of the music of that got into The Clouds Come Floating. And I know it's going to be much more idiomatic, much more enjoyable for cello and piano than it was for the previous instrumentation.
That's very interesting.
Well, I'm not sure it's interesting because I'm embarrassed to say it, but I try to compose the music that someone requests, and not everything I do is as good as I want it to be, and I have to keep on working.
Well, look, in our sort of pregame conversation, we talked a bit about Brahms, and of course, we all know how much of his own music he burnt.
Yes.
And I think it's also worth noting that Brahms, maybe he's not the most prolific in this way, but Brahms often borrowed from his own music. I can't tell you how many pieces of his I've played, and they'll say, "Oh yes, this passage from the piano quintet, this theme actually comes from an early piano trio that he destroyed." And you think, well, what an extraordinary theme that is. So I think it's a normal thing.
Composers have done this for almost forever. Stravinsky, he always saw an opportunity to make money. So if he could take a piece and then redo it, re-instrumentate it, he did. And I think that's really, really good. I'm going to tell you a little bit about something that I don't know whether I should be telling you, but I was concerned about the 6 songs, the ones that were premiered very recently, and probably better part of a year ago, I didn't know whether we were going to be able to do them or not. So I made a piano solo arrangement of all 6 of them.
Wow.
And I have not released the piano pieces yet because I wanted to have the songs premiered first. But that's something that I've been working with too. And songs with piano accompaniment do indeed go very nicely into piano solo arrangement.
Yeah.
Interestingly, it makes the piano piece different because there's an emphasis on melodic line naturally that's not quite so obvious in solo piano pieces that don't have a song as the genesis.
So you call it songs with or without words, right?
I wrestled with titles exactly like that.
That's great. That's great. That's a really cool idea. I love that. I mean, so many composers have done that. You know, Beethoven wrote, you know, some of his, you know, the septet, for instance, is an incredible piece, but, you know, you're just not likely to get those instruments together in one room, especially at that time. It was such an odd instrumentation. So he just made a piano trio version of it that's come down, and now everyone knows those themes, but, you know, a lot of musicians don't realize it comes from a pretty early septet.
Yeah,
you know?
One of the things that I liked from Mélomanie was a concert that was done. I don't remember the church, but a church in Wilmington, a nice hard surface, high ceiling church, and Kim did a piece of mine called "Flute Thing," which is from a little bit earlier than Rhapsody, the piece that you recorded. And Flute Thing is originally written for solo flute and a tape delay system. And in 1970, a tape delay system indeed had 2 machines that were on each side of the stage. The one machine was the record machine, and the tape, reel-to-reel tape, went from the record machine, not to a take-up reel on that machine, but all the way across stage to another machine where it went by the playheads and then on to the take-up reel there. So the intervening distance caused there to be a delay of, well, I specify I want 7 seconds. And then the mixing materials allowed me to record material that's new, record material that is playback, to playback material without recording. So almost any combination. But in that church, the sound just kind of wallowed all over the place, and it was a wonderful sound. And I've had many recordings of performances of Flute Thing, but I enjoyed that one particularly with Kim's playing, extraordinary as always, but also the sound in that church. It was a neat experience.
That's really cool. That just goes to show too how special a live performance is. You know,
oh yeah,
how unique being in the environment is. You know, I often find myself when listening to recordings wondering, boy, what must it have been like to be in the room? You know,
yes,
as electrifying as live recordings can be. So that's a great story. I really like that. Thank you so much, Larry. This has been a pleasure getting to know you a bit and getting to know more about Moonbow. We'll certainly look forward to performing it much more, and we hope everyone will pick up their copy of this CD so they can hear Moonbow as we interpreted it. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Ismar.